You know you've been betrayed when your replacement thinks CSV is a computer virus. My name is Dr. Melissa Grant, though most people at Westview Academy call me Dr. G. At 42. I've spent nearly 2 decades building something extraordinary in our modest public high school in Clearwater Hills. STEM Ignite wasn't just a program, it was my life's work. A comprehensive initiative that transformed struggling students into confident young scientists and engineers. I wrote every grant application, designed every curriculum module, mentored countless students through difficult times, and built every process from scratch. It was my baby, and everyone knew it. That's why it stung so much when I was passed over for the vacant assistant principal position. Not that I'm entitled to promotions, but when you've dedicated your life to an institution, you expect a certain level of respect and recognition. Instead, Principal Karen Bellamy announced she was appointing her old friend Emily Rhodes, a former English teacher with 0 management experience, to the role. Emily Rhodes, the same woman who was once reprimanded for letting students watch TikTok videos instead of reviewing for their standardized tests. The same woman who once asked me if a weekly lesson distribution was some kind of Google Calendar feature. Now she would be my superior, making decisions about the program I had built from nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I simply sent a 12-word email resignation that evening and began methodically planning my exit. The next morning, I quietly collected everything that legally belonged to me: USB drives containing all grant documents, hard copies of funding agreements, legal paperwork, all signed under my name. Then I sent formal resignation notices to every funding agency, the State Department of Education, the Department of Labor, and accreditation organizations. What Principal Bellamy and her friend Emily failed to understand was that every grant, every partnership, every legal permission for the STEM Ignite program was tied to me personally as the responsible party. Without me, they would all become null and void. I didn't realize how quickly everything would unravel for them. But as I settled into my new role at Maple Ridge Charter School, just 15 miles away, launching the Future Bridge Scholars Program, essentially an upgraded version of what I'd built at Westview, I watched from afar as my former school struggled to maintain what I had so carefully constructed. They couldn't complete their quarterly reports. Students lost internship opportunities because of missing legal documentation. Clubs were canceled, and the State STEM Showcase removed Westview from its roster. Emily couldn't even open an Excel file properly, while Karen was busy blaming missing central documentation for their failures. The emergency school board meeting that followed was apparently quite a spectacle. Board members began questioning Karen about why she had pushed me out. A state accreditation representative confirmed what was becoming obvious: everything had run smoothly, solely because of my management. And now the program was in a state of compliance failure. Local newspapers started asking questions. Parents showed up at board meetings demanding answers. Students organized protests, and through it all, I simply focused on building something even better at Maple Ridge. When Karen finally called to beg me to help them transition, I politely declined. I was too busy securing $1.8 million in first-month funding for my new program. The video announcing this achievement was played during a particularly tense board meeting at Westview. I'm told, I didn't get revenge through anger. I got it through precision and competence. Karen and Emily remained stuck in the mess they created, while I wrote an even brighter new chapter for myself. The strange thing about betrayal in professional settings is how quickly it can backfire when people underestimate your value. I learned this lesson the hard way, or rather, Karen and Emily did. Looking back now, 3 years after leaving Westview Academy, I can see the events that led to my departure with much more clarity. The signs of trouble had been there for months before the assistant principal position opened up. Karen Bellamy had been bringing Emily around for tours and observations with increasing frequency. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Emily had left teaching for a few years to raise her children and was possibly looking to return to education. What I didn't realize was that Karen was already grooming her friend for a leadership position. I had been at Westview for 15 years by then. After earning my doctorate in educational leadership with a focus on STEM integration, I had turned down offers from prestigious private schools, to work in the public system where I believed I could make a greater difference. Clearwater Hills wasn't affluent by any means. Our district struggled with budget cuts and limited resources like most public schools in America. That's precisely why I created STEM Ignite. The program began as a simple after-school club with just 12 students and a single microscope I had purchased with my own money. Over time, I secured small grants, then larger ones. I convinced local businesses to donate equipment and offer internships. I recruited other passionate teachers to volunteer their time. Within 5 years, STEM Ignite had grown into a comprehensive program serving over 300 students annually, with dedicated classroom space, state-of-the-art equipment, and a reputation that extended beyond our district. Most importantly, we were getting results. Our students, many from disadvantaged backgrounds, were winning science competitions, securing prestigious scholarships, and pursuing STEM degrees at rates that rivaled exclusive private schools. The program had become the crown jewel of Westview Academy, and everyone knew I was the architect behind its success. Dr. G saved my life. Maria Gonzalez told a local reporter during a feature on our program. Maria had been failing most of her classes as a freshman before joining STEM Ignite. 3 years later, she was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Before I met her, I didn't think college was even possible for someone like me. Now I'm going to be an engineer. Stories like Maria's were common, and they kept me going through budget crises, administrative changes, and the exhaustion that came from essentially working 2 full-time jobs, teaching regular science classes during the day and running STEM Ignite before and after school hours. I didn't mind the long hours because I could see the impact of my work every day in the faces of my students. So when Assistant Principal Robert Chen announced his retirement, several department heads approached me about applying for the position. "You're already doing half the job anyway," said Diane from the math department. "And you have the credentials. It makes perfect sense." It did make perfect sense. As STEM Ignite director, I already managed budgets, supervised staff, coordinated with external organizations, and handled complex compliance requirements. I had the educational background, the experience, and the respect of the faculty. Even students circulated a petition supporting my candidacy that gathered over 500 signatures in 2 days. I submitted my application and was called for an interview with the selection committee, which included Karen, 2 board members, and a district representative. The interview went exceptionally well, or so I thought. The board members seemed enthusiastic about my vision for expanding STEM Ignite's success to other areas of the curriculum. And the district rep asked thoughtful questions about my leadership philosophy. Karen, however, remained oddly detached throughout the process, offering only tight smiles and perfunctory nods. At the time, I attributed her coolness to professional distance maintaining objectivity during the selection process. I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 weeks after the interviews, we received an all-staff email announcing an important assembly for the following Monday. Rumors immediately began circulating that this would be the announcement of Robert's replacement. I received congratulatory texts from colleagues who assumed, as most did, that I would be named assistant principal. The assembly was held in the auditorium after school. Teachers, staff, and even some students crowded in, the atmosphere buzzing with anticipation. Karen took the stage, her expression unreadable behind a practiced smile. "As you all know, we've been conducting a thorough search for our new assistant principal following Dr. Chen's retirement announcement," she began, her voice carrying through the sound system. "This was not an easy decision, as we had several qualified candidates." She paused, scanning the room. I sat near the front, hands folded in my lap, trying to look composed despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm pleased to announce that our new assistant principal will be Ms. Emily Rhodes." The silence that followed lasted only seconds but felt eternal. Then came scattered applause, confused murmurs, and several heads turning in my direction with expressions ranging from shock to sympathy. Emily emerged from the side entrance, waving enthusiastically as if she'd just won a game show prize. Her floral dress and excessive jewelry seemed jarringly out of place in the serious setting of an administrative announcement. "Thank you so much, Principal Bellamy." Emily gushed into the microphone. I'm just so excited to join the Westview family and work with all you amazing educators. I've been away from teaching for a while, but I'm ready to bring fresh energy to this role. And I'm especially looking forward to learning all about that wonderful science program everyone talks about. That wonderful science program, not even knowing its name. My program, my life's work. I maintained my composure somehow, offering a polite handshake to Emily when she bounded over to me after the announcement. Karen watched our interaction carefully from across the room, her eyes narrowing when several teachers pointedly came to stand beside me in a show of silent support. I hope we can work closely together. Melissa, Emily said, using my first name despite having just met me. Karen says your science club is just fabulous. Science club. 15 years of building a nationally recognized STEM program reduced to a science club in the eyes of the woman who would now have authority over me and my work. I nodded noncommittally and excused myself, walking slowly and deliberately out of the auditorium while feeling dozens of eyes on my back. I made it to my classroom, closed the door, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. It wasn't just disappointment, it was the blatant disrespect. The clear message that my contributions to the school were not valued by the administration. It was the realization that Karen had likely never intended to consider me seriously for the position. That the interviews had been mere theater to maintain the appearance of a fair selection process. I sat at my desk for nearly an hour, thinking. Not about how unfair it was or how hurt I felt, but about what this meant for my future at Westview and for STEM Ignite. If the program wasn't valued by leadership, how long before budget cuts or new directions began to undermine what we had built? How long before Emily's inexperience and Karen's favoritism created obstacles that would harm our students? The vibration of my phone interrupted my thoughts. It was a text from James Turner, the principal at Maple Ridge Charter School. We had collaborated on some inter-school STEM initiatives in the past. Heard about what happened, their loss. Call me if you want to discuss options. That text was the catalyst that transformed my hurt into resolution. By the time I left the building that evening, I'd already begun formulating my exit strategy. Not just for me, but for everything I had built. The next morning, I arrived at school an hour earlier than usual. The building was quiet, with only custodial staff moving through the hallways. I unlocked my classroom and the adjacent STEM Ignite lab, then methodically began gathering materials. First, I collected all the grant documentation. As the principal investigator and official recipient of every grant STEM Ignite had received, I had both the legal right and obligation to maintain these records. I carefully transferred digital files to my personal drives and collected hard copies into my portfolio. Next came the partnership agreements with local businesses and universities. Again, these were established under my name and professional credentials. The internship coordination documents, the safety protocols, the intellectual property agreements for student innovations, all of these were legal documents that named me specifically as the responsible party. I wasn't taking anything that didn't legally belong to me. I wasn't sabotaging the program out of spite. I was simply exercising my right to resign from my positions, both as a science teacher at Westview and as director of STEM Ignite, and taking my personal property and legal obligations with me. By 7:30 a.m., my car was loaded with several boxes of documents and personal items. I left my classroom keys and ID badge on my desk, alongside a printed copy of my resignation letter. The letter was brief and professional. Please accept this letter as a formal notification of my resignation from my positions as science teacher and STEM Ignite director at Westview Academy. Effective immediately. Sincerely, Dr. Melissa Grant. Then I sent emails to every organization that provided funding or support to STEM Ignite, informing them of my resignation and the consequent need to reevaluate our agreements. I copied the school board and district office on these communications to ensure complete transparency. Within an hour, my inbox began filling with concerned replies, many expressing dismay and asking about the future of the program. I didn't answer those emails immediately. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop across town, ordered a large latte, and called James Turner. I'm interested in those options we discussed, I said when he answered. I thought you might be, he replied. How soon can you come in for a meeting? I'm available now. The meeting at Maple Ridge Charter lasted 3 hours. By the end, I had a verbal offer to join their faculty as both a science teacher and the founding director of a new program called Future Bridge Scholars. The salary was 20% higher than what I'd been making at Westview, with additional stipends for program development and grant writing. More importantly, I would have autonomy and explicit support from administration. The school board had already approved the basic framework and initial funding. All they needed was someone with the expertise to build it from the ground up. Someone exactly like me. I signed the preliminary agreement that afternoon. By the time I returned home, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls, 8 from Karen, 5 from various school board members, 3 from the district office, and 1 from Emily. I ignored them all and spent the evening drafting proposals for Future Bridge Scholars, energized by the prospect of building something new without the constraints and lack of appreciation I'd experienced at Westview. The fallout at my former school began almost immediately. Karen's first frantic voicemail came at 10:23 a.m., barely 2 hours after I'd left the building. Melissa, this is Karen. We need to discuss your email. Please call me back immediately. Her second message, left at 11:45 a.m., had an edge of panic. Dr. Grant, the State Department of Education is calling about some notification you sent them. This is extremely unprofessional. Call me back now. By her third call at 2:17 p.m., the panic had given way to barely contained anger. The board chair is here in my office, and we're looking at potential legal actions if you don't return these calls and explain what you've done. This is sabotage, Melissa. I wasn't worried about legal threats. Before sending any notifications, I'd consulted briefly with an attorney who specialized in educational law. Everything I had done was within my rights. The grants had been awarded to me as the principal investigator. The partnerships had been established under my professional credentials. My resignation necessitated disclosure to these organizations, and I had fulfilled that obligation promptly and professionally. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly things would fall apart at Westview without my oversight of STEM Ignite. The first major crisis came just 3 days after my departure, when students were scheduled to begin their spring internships with local technology companies. The internship coordinator from Clearwater Tech called Karen directly when none of the required paperwork arrived for the 5 students they were expecting. What do you mean? What paperwork? I imagined Karen saying, her face flushing with frustration. The same paperwork we've sent for the past 8 years. But of course, she had no idea what paperwork was needed because she had never been involved in the process. Neither had Emily. The only person who knew all the requirements, all the forms, all the legal considerations, had cleaned out her desk 3 days earlier. Similar issues arose with the robotics competition scheduled for the following weekend. The team had qualified months ago. But without me to handle the final registration details and liability waivers, they were unable to participate. 20 heartbroken students watched as their months of hard work came to nothing. The quarterly report for our largest grant was due 2 weeks after my resignation. This was a complex document requiring detailed financial accounting, progress metrics, and projections for the coming quarter. Karen assigned Emily to complete it, apparently believing that an English teacher with no background in either STEM education or grant management could somehow puzzle it out. According to Diane, who texted me regular updates, Emily spent 3 days trying to open and understand the Excel spreadsheets before declaring them corrupted and suggesting they ask for an extension. The funding agency denied the extension request and placed the grant on probationary status. 1 month after my departure, the situation had deteriorated so dramatically that the school board called an emergency meeting. By this time, I was fully established at Maple Ridge, having already secured initial funding for Future Bridge Scholars and recruited an impressive team of educators and industry partners. I had no intention of attending Westview's board meeting, but Diane live-streamed it for me surreptitiously via her phone. The meeting room was packed with parents, students, and community members. Board Chair Michael Peters called the meeting to order with a grim expression. We're here tonight to address the serious issues that have arisen with the STEM Ignite program following Dr. Grant's departure. He began, choosing his words carefully. Principal Bellamy will provide an update on the current status. Karen approached the podium, looking significantly more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. The perfectly coiffed blonde hair and immaculate suits that had been her trademark were replaced by a messy ponytail and a rumpled blouse. The situation is challenging, she admitted. We've experienced some transitional difficulties due to missing documentation and unclear processes. A parent stood up without waiting to be recognized. My daughter lost her internship opportunity because of your transitional difficulties. That internship was going to help her get into Carnegie Mellon. Another parent joined in. The robotics team was disqualified from regionals. These kids worked all year for that competition. My son's research project might lose its funding, added a third parent. How could you let this happen? Karen attempted to regain control of the meeting. Please, everyone, we understand your concerns. We're working diligently to reconstruct the necessary documentation and processes. Ms. Rhodes has been putting in extra hours to... Ms. Rhodes doesn't even know what STEM stands for. This came from a student in the back, followed by scattered laughter and applause. Board Chair Peters intervened. Let's maintain order, please. We're here to find solutions. Principal Bellamy, has there been any communication with Dr. Grant about assisting with the transition? Karen's expression hardened. Dr. Grant has been unresponsive to our attempts to contact her. Her actions have been extremely unprofessional and potentially harmful to our students. That was when Dr. Uazdi, Sarah Jenkins, the State Education Department representative who had worked closely with me on several initiatives, asked to speak. She had apparently attended the meeting specifically to address the situation. I feel I need to provide some context here, she said, approaching the microphone. STEM Ignite has been one of the most successful educational programs in our state for the past decade. Its success was due almost entirely to Dr. C. Grant's leadership, vision, and incredible work ethic. She single-handedly secured millions in funding, established partnerships with top universities and corporations, and created opportunities for students who might otherwise never have considered STEM careers. She paused, looking directly at Karen. The grants and partnerships were awarded based on Dr. Grant's credentials, reputation, and track record. When she resigned, she had both a legal and ethical obligation to inform all stakeholders. From our perspective at the state level, she handled this transition with complete professionalism. Another pause. The failure here was not Dr. Grant's resignation, but rather the lack of institutional knowledge and support that made the program so dependent on a single individual. That's a leadership and succession planning failure. The room erupted in murmurs and nods of agreement. Karen's face went from red to white. Dr. Jenkins wasn't finished. Furthermore, I should inform this board that our department has received a proposal for a new program called Future Bridge Scholars at Maple Ridge Charter School, under Dr. Grant's leadership. Given her track record and the comprehensive nature of the proposal, it is likely to receive substantial state funding. The meeting devolved further from there, with parents demanding answers and board members beginning to ask pointed questions about Karen's decision to appoint Emily rather than me to the assistant principal position. Diane ended her live stream when the board announced they would go into executive session. But she texted me later that evening. Board is discussing personnel matters behind closed doors. Karen looks like she's about to have a stroke. Emily left in tears 20 minutes ago. Wish you could see this. I didn't take pleasure in their distress. That wasn't why I had made the decisions I did. My actions were about protecting my professional integrity and creating a better opportunity for myself and ultimately for students who deserved the best educational experiences possible. If that meant Westview had to face the consequences of undervaluing my contributions, so be it. 2 days after the board meeting, Karen finally stopped calling my personal number and sent a formal email instead. Dr. Grant, The Westview Academy School Board has authorized me to offer you a consulting position to assist with the reconstruction and transition of the STEM Ignite program. This would be a temporary role with competitive compensation, allowing you to maintain your current position elsewhere while helping us preserve the program you built. Please consider this offer in the best interest of the students who have benefited so greatly from your work. Regards, Karen Bellamy, Principal, Westview Academy. I waited 24 hours before responding. Principal Bellamy, thank you for your offer. However, I must decline. My current commitments at Maple Ridge Charter School require my full attention and energy. The Future Bridge Scholars Program is in a critical development phase that demands my complete focus. I wish you and the students at Westview Academy all the best. Sincerely, Dr. Melissa Grant, Director, Future Bridge Scholars Program, Maple Ridge Charter School. Short, professional, final. No mention of how they could have avoided this situation. No recriminations about being passed over for Emily. No suggestion that they could have prevented all of this by simply valuing my contributions appropriately. The message was clear enough without stating it explicitly. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Over the following weeks, I channeled all my energy into building Future Bridge Scholars into something even more impressive than STEM Ignite had been. With the full support of James and the Maple Ridge Board, I was able to implement ideas that had been repeatedly sidelined at Westview. We created specialized tracks for different STEM disciplines, established a mentorship program pairing students with industry professionals, and integrated entrepreneurship education into the curriculum. Most gratifying was the opportunity to build a true succession plan from the beginning. I hired a deputy director and established detailed documentation protocols to ensure that the program could survive any personnel changes. No student would lose opportunities because the program was too dependent on any single individual, including me. 3 months after my departure from Westview, Future Bridge Scholars received its first major grant, $1.8 million, from the National Science Foundation to develop an innovative approach to teaching computational thinking across disciplines. The announcement made regional news, with several outlets running features on the visionary new program transforming STEM education. A video produced by the local PBS affiliate showcased our state-of-the-art facilities. Enthusiastic students, including several who had transferred from Westview, and interviews with me about the philosophy behind the program. I was careful never to mention my former school or the circumstances of my departure. There was no need. The contrast spoke for itself. According to Diane, this video was played during another contentious Westview board meeting by a parent demanding to know why their school had driven away such a valuable educator. By this time, STEM Ignite was a shadow of its former self. Most of the specialized equipment sat unused because no one knew how to properly maintain it. Grant funding had been reduced to a trickle. The partnerships with local businesses had mostly dissolved due to communication issues. Emily Rhodes had been quietly removed from the assistant principal position and reassigned to teaching remedial English. Karen Bellamy was placed on administrative leave pending a review of her leadership decisions. The board had hired a consulting firm to evaluate the viability of rebuilding STEM Ignite or creating an entirely new program at considerable expense to the already strained budget. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles. If anything, I felt sad for the students who had lost opportunities because of poor administrative decisions. But I also recognized that I had done everything I could within that system for 15 years. And it was time to build something new in an environment where my contributions would be valued. A year after leaving Westview, I received an email from Maria Gonzalez, now completing her freshman year at MIT. Dr. G, I heard what happened at Westview after you left. I'm so sorry they didn't appreciate you the way we students did. But I'm not surprised you've already built something amazing at your new school. You always taught us that setbacks are just setups for comebacks. I'm doing well at MIT, though the classes are intense. The foundation you gave me through STEM Ignite has been invaluable. Several professors have commented on my lab techniques and analytical skills, all things I learned from you. I'll be home for summer break next month. Would it be possible to visit Future Bridge Scholars? I'd love to talk to your students about college prep and maybe mentor someone the way you mentored me. You changed my life. Dr. T. No administrative decision can ever take that away. With gratitude, Maria. Her email brought tears to my eyes, the first I had allowed myself since that assembly when Emily was announced as assistant principal. Maria was right. Whatever happened at Westview, whatever became of STEM Ignite, the impact I had made on students like her could never be undone. And now I was in a position to help even more students at Maple Ridge. 3 years have passed since then. Future Bridge Scholars has become a nationally recognized program, with educators from across the country visiting to learn from our model. We've expanded to serve over 500 students annually and established satellite programs in 2 neighboring districts. Our graduates have earned millions in scholarships and admissions to prestigious universities. Westview eventually created a new STEM program under different leadership. It's smaller and less ambitious than what we had built, but it's providing opportunities for students, and that's what matters most. Karen Bellamy resigned and took a position with an educational consulting firm. Emily Rhodes returned to teaching English full-time. Life moved on for all of us. The lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about recognizing your own value and having the courage to walk away from situations where that value isn't respected. It was about building something so exceptional that its absence speaks louder than any argument you could make. It was about understanding that sometimes the best response to disrespect is simply to take your talents elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves. As for me, I've never regretted my decision to leave. When I walk through the halls of Maple Ridge and see students engaged in complex projects, when I watch their faces light up with understanding, when I hear about our alumni making breakthroughs in research or launching innovative startups, I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. They replaced me with a friend and discovered too late that what they actually needed was me. Not just my name on grant applications or my signature on partnership agreements, but my vision, my expertise, my dedication. Those things couldn't be transferred to Emily with a title and an office. Those things came with me to Maple Ridge, where they were valued appropriately from day one. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply to walk away and succeed elsewhere. The rest takes care of itself. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me when, 2 years after my departure, Westview's new STEM program director reached out to me for advice. His name was Dr. Thomas Rivera, a former engineering professor who had decided to transition to secondary education. He had no connection to the previous administration, having been hired after both Karen and Emily had moved on. "I've been studying the history of STEM education in this district," he said during our coffee meeting. "Everything leads back to you and what you built at Westview. I'd like to understand how you did it." I appreciated his directness and lack of pretense. There was no attempt to gloss over what had happened or to minimize my contributions. Just honest professional respect. "It wasn't magic," I told him. "Just years of persistent effort, relationship building, and a refusal to accept no when it came to creating opportunities for students. The program documentation I inherited is sparse," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Lots of gaps. It's like trying to assemble furniture with half the instructions missing." I wasn't surprised. The documentation had been comprehensive when I left, but without someone who understood the underlying systems and relationships, much of it would have seemed like disconnected pieces rather than a coherent whole. "What specifically are you struggling with?" I asked. "Everything from grant cycles to partnership maintenance to curriculum sequencing. The previous administration seemed to be reinventing the wheel at every turn." We spent 3 hours that afternoon discussing the fundamental architecture of effective STEM programs. I shared insights about funding sources, community engagement strategies, and assessment approaches, not because I owed anything to Westview, but because I believed in the broader mission of expanding quality STEM education for all students. "Can I ask something personal, Dr. Rivera said as our meeting was wrapping up. "Given everything you accomplished and how it ended, do you have any regrets?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that students experienced disruption during the transition. I regret that some opportunities were lost while the school found its footing again." I paused. "But I don't regret standing up for my own professional value. And I don't regret building Future Bridge Scholars. Sometimes the right path isn't the easiest one." He nodded thoughtfully. The school board members I've spoken with have expressed similar sentiments, not in so many words. But the implication is clear. They recognize the mistake that was made. That's in the past now, I said. What matters is moving forward and creating the best possible programs for students at both our schools. We parted with a handshake and a tentative agreement to explore possible collaboration between our programs in the future. Not a merger or a competition, but a partnership of equals with shared goals. It was more than I would have expected possible in the immediate aftermath of my departure. As I drove back to Maple Ridge that afternoon, I reflected on how dramatically my professional life had changed in 3 years. The hurt and anger I'd initially felt had long since dissipated, replaced by satisfaction in what I had built and appreciation for where the journey had led me. Future Bridge Scholars had recently been featured in a national education journal as a model program for integrating authentic research experiences into secondary education. We had just secured our largest grant to date, $3.5 million, to develop a curriculum framework that could be implemented in schools nationwide. Our first graduating class had achieved a 100% college acceptance rate, with over 70% pursuing STEM majors. None of this would have happened had I remained at Westview, fighting the same battles for resources and recognition year after year. Being passed over for the assistant principal position, painful as it was at the time, had forced me to reevaluate my situation and take a risk on something new. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection to something better. My phone buzzed with a text from James Turner. Board approved the expansion proposal unanimously. Full funding for the new wing. We're breaking ground next month. Another milestone. The Future Bridge Scholars program had outgrown our original space, and the school was adding a dedicated wing with specialized laboratories, collaborative workspaces, and a small lecture hall for visiting speakers and community events. The kind of facility I dreamed about but could never secure at Westview. Fantastic news, I replied. The students are going to be thrilled. As I pulled into the Maple Ridge parking lot, I spotted a familiar face. Maria Gonzalez, now a junior at MIT, was waiting by the entrance. She had become a regular visitor, returning during breaks to mentor current students and help with our college preparation workshops. Dr. G, she called, waving enthusiastically. You'll never believe what happened. My research team just got published in the Journal of Computational Biology. I'm a co-author. Her excitement was contagious, her achievement remarkable for an undergraduate. As she showed me the digital version of the journal on her tablet, pointing out her name in the author list, I felt that familiar surge of pride that comes from seeing a former student soar beyond what even they thought possible. This is incredible, Maria, I said, genuinely impressed. Tell me all about the research. As we walked into the building together, with her, animatedly explaining complex computational models for predicting protein folding, I was struck by a simple truth. This is why I do what I do. Not for recognition or titles or validation from administrators, but for moments like this, watching young minds discover their potential and use it to advance human knowledge. The next morning, I arrived early to find several faculty members gathered in the conference room adjacent to my office. James was there, along with our development director, curriculum coordinators, and the architects for the new wing. We wanted to surprise you, James said with a grin. The construction company can start 2 weeks earlier than planned. We're meeting to finalize some design details and thought you should be part of it. As we reviewed blueprints and discussed the optimal configuration for the research spaces, I marveled at how different this experience was from my years at Westview. Here, my expertise was not just acknowledged but actively sought out. My input wasn't an afterthought but a central consideration in planning. I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table. The table had been arranged with me in mind. Later that day, I received an email from the National Science Foundation Program Officer overseeing our latest grant. Dr. Grant, I wanted to let you know that your mid-year progress report was highlighted in our directors' meeting as an exemplary model of clear communication and measurable outcomes. Several colleagues have asked for permission to share it with other grantees as a template. Would you be comfortable with that? Also, we're organizing a panel at the upcoming STEM Education Summit on building sustainable programs in secondary education. Given your success with future Bridge scholars, and particularly your emphasis on succession planning and institutional knowledge transfer, we would like to invite you to be a featured speaker. Please let me know if you're interested and available. Best regards, Dr. Eleanor Mendez, Program Director, STEM Education Initiative's National Science Foundation. 5 years ago, such recognition would have seemed like an impossible dream. Now it was simply another validation of the path I had chosen. I accepted both requests immediately and began jotting down ideas for my presentation. If my experience could help other educators build more resilient programs, perhaps some good could come from the difficult transition at Westview. My schedule for the afternoon included a meeting with our Student Leadership Council, a group of exceptional young people who helped shape program priorities and organized peer support initiatives. As I gathered my materials, my assistant poked her head in. "Dr. Grant, you have an unexpected visitor, a Ms. Diane Fisher. She says she's an old colleague." Diane had remained at Westview after my departure, continuing to teach mathematics and occasionally updating me on significant developments. We had maintained a friendly but distant relationship, meeting for coffee once or twice a year. Her unannounced visit was unusual. "Please send her in," I said, curious about what had prompted this unexpected appearance. Diane entered looking both excited and nervous, clutching a folder to her chest. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, Melissa. I wouldn't have come without calling first, but this couldn't wait." "It's good to see you," I assured her. "What's going on?" She placed the folder on my desk and sat down. "The district is creating a new position, STEM coordinator for all schools in the county. It would involve overseeing program development, resource allocation, professional development for teachers, the works, essentially scaling up what you've built here to reach every student in the district." I nodded, still not understanding why this had prompted her urgent visit. "The search committee wants you to apply," she continued. "In fact, Dr. Rivera and I have been advocating for you specifically. The posting goes live tomorrow, but I wanted to give you advance notice." I was genuinely surprised. "That's unexpected, given the history." Diane smiled wryly. "History has been reassessed. The new superintendent has made it very clear that rebuilding bridges with you is a priority. Your success here hasn't gone unnoticed. And frankly, they're tired of being overshadowed by Maple Ridge in every STEM competition and college acceptance metric." She pushed the folder toward me. "This is the official job description and some additional context about the district's 5-year plan for STEM education. The salary and authority levels are substantial. You'd have a real opportunity to shape STEM education across the entire county." "I'm flattered," I said, and I meant it. There was a certain satisfaction in having the same district that had undervalued me now actively recruiting me for a position of significant influence. "But I'm very happy at Maple Ridge. We're just breaking ground on a new facility. Our programs are thriving." "Just promise me you'll think about it," Diane said. "No one expects an immediate answer. The application deadline is 3 weeks away." After she left, I opened the folder and reviewed the materials. The position was indeed impressive: comprehensive authority over STEM curriculum and programming across all grade levels, a substantial budget, and direct reporting to the superintendent rather than any individual principal. It represented everything I had once hoped to achieve within the district. 3 years ago, such an offer might have felt like vindication, a formal acknowledgement of the mistake that had been made and an attempt to make amends. Now, it simply felt like one option among many in a professional life that had expanded beyond what I could have imagined when I sent that 12-word resignation email. I closed the folder and set it aside. I had a student leadership council to meet with, plans for a new facility to finalize, and a presentation for the STEM Education Summit to prepare. Whatever decision I ultimately made about the district position, it would be based on where I could make the greatest impact for students, not on settling old scores or proving points that no longer needed proving. The next morning, I arrived at Maple Ridge to find James waiting in my office, a newspaper spread open on my desk. "Have you seen this?" he asked, pointing to a headline, County creates new STEM leadership position amid growing recognition of education gaps. The article detailed the new position Diane had told me about, with quotes from Dr. Rivera and the new superintendent explicitly mentioning the success of Future Bridge scholars as a model they hope to emulate across the district. My name appeared several times, described as a pioneering STEM educator and the architect of the county's most successful educational innovation in recent decades. Diane Fisher stopped by yesterday to tell me about this. I admitted. She brought the job description and encouraged me to apply. James's expression was unreadable. And will you? I sighed. I honestly don't know. It's an impressive opportunity with significant potential impact. Greater than what you're building here. There was no defensiveness in his tone, just genuine curiosity. Different, I clarified. Broader in scope, but potentially less depth. County-wide implementation means navigating multiple school cultures, administrative styles, resource disparities. All things you excel at, James noted. That's why they want you. What would you do, I asked, if you were in my position? He considered the question carefully before answering. I think I'd ask myself where I could do the most good while remaining true to my own values and vision. And I'd remember that sometimes the most effective leadership happens outside traditional power structures. It was thoughtful advice, characteristic of the supportive leadership style that had made Maple Ridge such a fulfilling place to work. There was no attempt to guilt me into staying, no suggestion that I owed loyalty to the school that had given me an opportunity when Westview had failed to value my contributions. Just respect for my professional judgment and an implicit trust that whatever decision I made would be well considered. Over the following weeks, I thought deeply about the district position. I met with the superintendent, toured several schools that would fall under the program's umbrella, and spoke with teachers who would be affected by any new initiatives. I also reflected on what we had built at Maple Ridge and the projects still in development. The decision crystallized during a seemingly ordinary day at Future Bridge Scholars. I was observing a group of students working on environmental monitoring devices they had designed for a local watershed project. Their enthusiasm, creativity, and growing confidence were palpable. In a corner of the lab, Maria was helping a sophomore troubleshoot a coding problem, passing on the knowledge she had gained at MIT just as I had once mentored her. This was what educational success looked like, not just test scores or college acceptances, but the creation of a self-sustaining community of learners who supported and inspired each other. We had built something special at Maple Ridge, something that transcended any individual program or curriculum, something that couldn't be easily replicated through policy mandates or district-wide initiatives, no matter how well-intentioned. The following day, I called the superintendent to decline the position. I believe I can have the greatest impact by continuing to develop and refine the Future Bridge model, I explained. However, I'd be happy to serve as an informal advisor to whoever you select and to help facilitate collaboration between the district programs and ours. Rather than disappointment, I heard relief in his response. To be honest, Dr. Grant, that's what I was hoping you'd say. Your program at Maple Ridge serves as a beacon for what's possible in STEM education. Sometimes we need pioneers working outside the system to show the rest of us the way forward. We agreed to establish a formal partnership between Future Bridge Scholars and the district's STEM initiatives. I would provide consultation on program development, professional development for teachers, and opportunities for inter-school collaboration. In return, the district would provide additional resources and expanded internship opportunities for our students. It wasn't the vindication of being recruited back into the district that had once undervalued me. It was something better recognition that what I had built independently had greater value, precisely because it had developed outside the constraints of the system that had failed to support my vision initially. When I shared my decision with James, he nodded thoughtfully. I suspected that's where you'd land. You've never been one to follow conventional paths. Is that a diplomatic way of saying I'm stubborn? I asked with a smile. Determined, he corrected. And that determination has created opportunities for hundreds of students who might otherwise have fallen through the cracks. Never apologize for that. As we discussed the partnership with the district and the implications for our program, I realized how far I had come from that moment of betrayal 3 years earlier. The hurt and anger had transformed into something constructive, not just for me, but for an entire educational community. What had begun as a simple desire to be valued appropriately had evolved into a mission to transform how we approach STEM education for all students. Sometimes being replaced is the beginning of something better than you could have imagined. Sometimes taking your ball and going home means you get to build a better playground. And sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge, but reinvention. They replaced me with a friend and expected business as usual. Instead, they learned a valuable lesson about the true foundation of successful educational programs. It's not about administrative titles or formal authority, but about vision, expertise, and unwavering commitment to students. Those qualities can't be appointed or transferred. They must be recognized, respected, and nurtured. As for me, I've found my place not as an assistant principal at a school that failed to value my contributions, but as the architect of an educational model that's changing lives and reshaping how we think about STEM education. It's not the path I would have chosen 3 years ago, but it's undoubtedly the right one. Sometimes the worst rejections lead to the best redirections. And sometimes taking everything you've built and starting over somewhere else is exactly what you and the world need. The day we broke ground on the new Future Bridge Scholars Wing at Maple Ridge was sunny and mild, perfect for the outdoor ceremony we had planned. Students, faculty, board members, community partners, and local officials gathered on the field where the new building would stand. Several former Westview colleagues attended as well, including Diane and Dr. Rivera, now leading their own revitalized STEM program. James gave a brief welcome speech, thanking everyone who had contributed to making the expansion possible. Then he introduced me to share my vision for the new facility. As I approached the podium, I saw Maria in the audience, sitting beside a group of my current students. She gave me a thumbs up and a bright smile. 3 years ago, she had been a promising student whose opportunities had been threatened by administrative decisions beyond her control. Now she was thriving at one of the world's top universities, returning to mentor the next generation, a living embodiment of what we had built together. This building represents more than just additional space, I began. It represents a commitment to the belief that every student deserves access to high-quality STEM education, regardless of background or circumstance. It represents a community that values innovation, collaboration, and excellence. And most importantly, it represents what we can achieve when we focus on creating opportunities rather than maintaining the status quo. I didn't mention Westview or the circumstances that had brought me to Maple Ridge. There was no need. Everyone present knew the story. And the results spoke for themselves. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and examined the architectural renderings displayed around the site, Dr. Rivera approached me. "Impressive," he said, gesturing toward the stakes and ribbons marking the footprint of the new building. "You've built something remarkable here." "Thank you," I replied. "How are things progressing at Westview?" "Steadily improving. We're not at your level yet, but we're learning. Your district partnership has been invaluable." I nodded, appreciating his candor. "It's not a competition. The goal is to create the best possible opportunities for all students." "That's a generous perspective, given the history," he observed. I smiled. Professional growth sometimes requires personal evolution. 3 years ago, I might have felt differently. Now I just want to see effective STEM education flourish everywhere. He studied me for a moment. "You know, the district position is still open. The first round of candidates didn't quite meet expectations. My decision hasn't changed," I said firmly. "But I'm committed to supporting whoever takes on that role." "Fair enough." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Some innovations need to develop outside traditional structures before they can transform those structures from within." As he moved away to speak with James, I reflected on how perfectly his comment captured my journey. What had begun as an act of self-preservation taking my program and funding when I was replaced had evolved into something more profound: the creation of an educational model that was now influencing district-wide policy and practice. Maria approached next, excitement evident in her rapid speech and animated gestures. Dr. G, I just heard from the MIT admissions office. They want me to be a student representative at the STEM College Fair here next month. I'll be helping recruit students from the county schools, including Westview and Maple Ridge. That's wonderful news, I said, genuinely pleased. You'll be an outstanding ambassador. It feels like everything's coming full circle, she mused. 4 years ago, I was just hoping to get into any college. Now I'm helping other students see what's possible for them. She glanced around at the bustling ceremony. None of this would have happened without you, Dr. G. You did the hard work, I reminded her. I just created the opportunity. That's what great teachers do, she insisted. They opened doors students didn't even know existed. As the event wound down and guests began to depart, I took a moment to stand alone at the center of what would become our new learning space. In my mind's eye, I could already see students working in the labs, collaborating in the shared spaces, presenting their research in the lecture hall. I could envision the partnerships, innovations, and transformative educational experiences that would emerge from this expansion. None of this would have been possible had I remained at Westview, fighting the same battles against the same limitations year after year. Being replaced, painful as it was at the time, had forced me to reimagine what was possible and take risks I might otherwise have avoided. James joined me, hands in his pockets, surveying the marked-out space. Penny, for your thoughts. I was just thinking about unexpected journeys, I said. 3 years ago, when I walked out of Westview with boxes of grant documents and partnership agreements, I had no idea where that path would lead. Regrets? He asked. I shook my head decisively. Not one. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you actually need. Well, we're certainly glad you found your way to Maple Ridge, he said with a warm smile. Here's to the next chapter. As we walked back toward the main building, I reflected on the strange symmetry of life's disappointments and opportunities. The betrayal that had once seemed so devastating had ultimately led to greater fulfillment and impact than I could have achieved had things gone according to my original plan. They replaced me with a friend and expected everything to continue as before. Instead, they discovered that programs built on individual excellence require proper recognition and support of that excellence. They learned that succession planning means more than simply filling positions with convenient candidates. And they realized too late that sometimes the most valuable assets walk out the door when they're underappreciated. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but rather the creation of something so extraordinary that it makes the original slight seem insignificant by comparison. I learned that walking away from disrespect can lead to opportunities for greater respect elsewhere. And I discovered that building something new often yields better results than fighting to preserve something old. In the end, being replaced turned out to be the best thing that could have happened not just for me, but for all the students whose lives would be transformed by what we built in the aftermath. Sometimes losing what you have is the only way to find what you're truly capable of creating. And sometimes taking your entire program and funding with you isn't an act of retribution, but the first step toward building something even better.